All right, council member. We are now live on YouTube and everywhere else. We're still collecting our last couple of witnesses, but our first four witnesses are here with us today. And so you can begin when you're ready.
Good morning. I'm Robert White, council member at large and chair of the Committee on Housing. Today is Tuesday, March 14th, 2023, and we're meeting remotely via the Zoom teleconferencing platform. The time is now 10:06 a.m. and I'm calling to order this public roundtable of the committee. Today, we're meeting to discuss resolution PR25-72, which would confirm the appointment of Colleen Green as director of the Department of Housing and Community Development, or DHCD. DHCD's mission is to produce and preserve opportunities for affordable housing and economic development and to revitalize underserved communities in the District of Columbia through producing and preserving affordable housing, increasing access to home ownership, and encouraging economic and community development. To fulfill this mission, DHCD administers a variety of programs, including rent stabilization, vacant and blighted property acquisition, home buyer assistance programs, the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, the District Opportunity to Purchase Act, condominium formation, and inclusionary zoning. One of DHCD's most well-known responsibilities is administering the district's Housing Production Trust Fund, which is a pot of money designed to support the preservation and production of affordable housing in the district. DHCD also leads compliance over several sources of federal funding and incentives from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, such as low-income housing tax credits and community development block grants. In January 2023, the mayor appointed nominee Colleen Green to serve as acting director of DHCD. According to the materials the mayor and Ms. Green provided to the council, this is not Ms. Green's first time working for the agency. From 2007 to 2009, Ms. Green served as DHCD's chief of staff. Over the course of her career, Ms. Green has overseen construction lending transactions at the Bank of America and KeyBank, managed a $60 million portfolio to develop housing in New York, Richmond, and DC, served as an advisor to small businesses on real estate transactions, and most recently worked for Core Services Group, a firm managing short-term housing projects like shelters and halfway houses in New York City and DC. Ms. Green's nomination comes at a time when many residents are feeling the ongoing burdens of high housing costs and low safety nets. Inflation and rents are up, local revenue projections are down, federal COVID supports are ending, and shelter capacity for unhoused residents is dropping. Affordability restrictions on at least 2,000 units are set to expire within the next 5 years, and the conditions of some existing affordable units are deplorable, impacting the physical and mental health of residents. DC's homeless services agencies say they alone cannot address this affordable housing crisis. They need agencies like DHCD to step up to the plate and create more meaningful opportunities for housing for our residents. While I believe DHCD has many of the tools and resources it needs to reverse the negative trends, what has been missing is effective implementation of its resources. One example is the use of the Housing Production Trust Fund. Over the past several years, the offices of Inspector General and the DC Auditor have raised significant concerns with DHCD's implementation and distribution of trust fund dollars, resulting in council passing additional reporting requirements for HPTF funding last spring. Additionally, at the committee's performance oversight hearing on DHCD a few weeks ago, we heard concerns about the quality of units funded by DHCD, prohibitive delays in processing times for home ownership programs, and a sense from some residents that DHCD is making decisions for rather than with their communities. If we invest in good programs without ensuring effective execution and move on projects without meaningful community engagement, we will continue to miss the mark. I look forward to hearing from Ms. Green about how she plans to use her experience to produce much needed shifts and improve housing outcomes in the district. Without council action, this resolution would be deemed approved on May 18th, 2023. Our committee sent standard written questions to the nominee and has received those responses. Before we start with our panel of public witnesses, I want to lay out the ground rules. Everyone should have received a copy of the witness list yesterday. I'll call witnesses on the list in order they appear on the list. When I call you, the staff will promote you from an attendee to a panelist so that you can testify. When you are promoted, you'll drop out of the hearing momentarily and come back in as a panelist, at which time you'll be able to unmute. Public witnesses have 4 minutes to testify. Advisory neighborhood commissioners have 5 minutes to testify. We have one panel of public witnesses that I will call now. Shelby Johnson, a student at Georgetown University. Kevin Petty, CEO of Amazing Gospel Souls Philemon Mission Transition Facility. Stephen Glaudet, President and CEO of the Coalition for Nonprofit Housing and Economic Development. Avram Fetter with Equity Plus. Meg McGuire, Board Chair of Northwest Opportunity Partners, CDC. Gina Boulette, Correspondent Secretary for the Northeast Boundary Civic Association. And give us just a couple minutes to get everyone queued up. There we go. Shelby Johnson, well, Kevin Petty, can you mute? Thank you. Shelby Johnson, you can begin your testimony. We can't see you, so if you intend for us to see you, please turn your camera on, but you can begin your testimony.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm trying to get my voice together.
No problem.
So I am a student at Georgetown University. I've been keeping a close eye on Miss Green for quite some time because I know that she was recently appointed by Mayor Muriel Bowser recently, and I've been keeping up with a lot of her work. I do believe that she is a very strong candidate, and I think she can definitely do something in reference to improving the conditions in a lot of these public housing homes and things like that. I am a student journalist, so one of the things I was focusing on was the conditions of housing, like camera surveillance, community involvement, and how we plan to improve and move forward as the district continues to grow and expand. And I do believe that she's a very, very strong candidate. I was looking through her portfolio earlier, and her work as acting director of the Department of Housing and Community Development. I think she has done some pretty strong work as a whole, especially overseeing a lot of the funding and things like that. So that's my testimony so far.
Thank you so much. Next we have, I believe it is Kevin Petty. Welcome. Good to have you.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman White. Good to see you again, and all the other distinguished council members who may be at the hearing this morning. My name is Kevin Petty. I'm CEO of the Amazing Gospel Souls Incorporated and the Philemon Mission Transitional Facility here in Ward 8 Southeast. I'm deeply honored for this opportunity to address you here today and extend my support for the confirmation of Director Colleen Green. I'm here today to offer AGS unwavering support for the confirmation and approval of Ms. Colleen Green as Director of the DC Department of Housing and Community Development. I'm always honored to address this council in this forum and add my 2 cents to important community concerns. There's no more important issue today than affordable housing and the effect affordable housing insecurity is having on poor communities. With the challenges the mayor is facing of building more affordable housing for our poor and underserved, the mayor could not have made a better choice in Director Colleen Green. From what I already know, she is responsive, she cares about our community, she's result oriented, a problem solver, data driven, out of the box thinker with vision and integrity. Right, a ray of hope was established when the mayor chose Director Colleen Green to head DHCD. At this time, I had the privilege of working with Director Green on the halfway house issue in our city a few years back, and was very impressed with her vision for community development and community growth. Her skill set was impeccable too. She showed a passion for serving those being left behind. She was very concerned about the fate of returning citizens returning to the city and whether they could navigate the city's reentry challenges. Right? I look forward to working with Director Green in Ward 8, where development of the poor and underserved communities there is critical. It's beginning to threaten our very existence as residents. Housing insecurity by itself is by far the gravest threat to the health of poor and underserved citizens, graver than anything else we're facing today. There's nothing else even close. Our communities and our government will have some challenging decisions to make, earnestly trying to address affordable housing in poor and underserved communities. Housing insecurity is effectively damaging our health at an alarming rate. So thank you so much for this opportunity to add my 2 cents to this discussion today. And relative to possibilities it holds for my community, I'm available to answer any questions and elaborate further if necessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Petty. Steve Blaudet, welcome. Good to have you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's a privilege to come before this committee and be with the other public witnesses who are here to comment today. I'm Steve Blaudet. I'm President and CEO of the Coalition for Nonprofit Housing and Economic Development, CNHED as we are known. Established in 2000, CNHED is a dynamic association of 180 nonprofit and mission-driven for-profit members working to foster just and equitable community development solutions that address the needs and aspirations of low and moderate income District of Columbia residents. I'm here today to offer CNHED's enthusiasm for this committee to recommend to the full council the approval of Ms. Green as Director of the DC Department of Housing and Community Development. Ms. Green's diverse background, as well as her past leadership role with DHCD, make her well qualified to lead the agency at this time. As you well know, Ms. Green previously served as Chief of Staff at DHCD under former Mayor Fenty. Her accomplishments include developing over 2,000 units of housing, disposition of a $60 million real estate fund, and manage reentry, homeless, and transitional housing programs. Her combination of programmatic as well as agency leadership work creates a good complement for executive leadership at DHCD. This background comforts CNHED regarding her qualifications for the DHCD position, but my enthusiasm comes from my first meeting with Acting Director Green weeks after her starting. She wanted to hear from CNHED's perspective early on about our issues and concerns. I was impressed with how well-versed she was on the contemporary issues facing the field and the agency, given her time away from the agency. We discussed the majority of challenges and opportunities we currently have. These issues range from bond cap challenges to pipeline status, program performance, and more. What inspires our endorsement of Ms. Green's appointment is her expressed openness to CNHED members' insights, expertise, challenges, and needs. She has graciously agreed that it would be constructive to meet with CNHED regularly to engage and strategize, something we are eager to undertake. We all know that we have some unique challenges ahead of us that include addressing post-pandemic conditions, repurposing downtown, maintaining momentum despite revenue disruptions, and more. We look forward to having an open-minded partner in Director Green as we strategize on how to face these challenges together. We encourage this committee's unanimous approval of Colleen Green as Director of the DC Department of Housing and Community Development. We believe she will be a tremendous asset to DHCD's operations and outcomes. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. Happy to respond to any of my comments or any questions that you or committee members may have.
Thank you so much. Avram Fetcher.
Good morning, and thank you for having me to testify in front of the committee today. I testified strongly supporting this nomination. I'm Avram Fetcher, Managing Director of Equity Plus. Equity Plus is an investment banking and real estate development firm that specializes in financing and developing affordable housing, workforce housing, and other community development projects across the country. Teaming with strategic partners like Jubilee Housing, Manna, Urban Atlantic, Housing Up, and others, we currently are working on 12 projects at various stages of DHCD's development pipeline, representing over 1,000 units of affordable and workforce housing. The past few years have been particularly difficult for those in the affordable housing industry. Construction projects have seen their costs increase by 30 to 40% in as little as 12 to 18 months. Supply chain issues have caused significant delays in completing projects. Rapid increases in interest rates have constrained the amount of private capital available to finance these. Bond allocation, the lifeblood of affordable housing, has become increasingly scarce. Time has become the biggest killer of affordable housing projects. Delays in getting to a construction closing add to carrying costs, while exposing projects to increases in interest rates and construction prices, ultimately requiring even more subsidies from DHCD to develop the same number of affordable units with the same affordability mix. DHCD is the engine that keeps the affordable housing industry moving in the District of Columbia. In these challenging times, it is critical that DHCD have a director who understands how affordable housing is financed and developed, while also being decisive, creative, and fair. I had the pleasure of working for Colleen Green when she was Chief of Staff at DHCD in her previous tenure at the agency. Colleen is the perfect nominee to head DHCD as the agency seeks to help navigate these uncharted waters. Colleen's previous tenure at DHCD proves that she knows how to keep the trains moving while making difficult decisions about the allocation of DHCD's precious resources in a manner that maximizes the amount of affordable housing units delivered with DHCD's financing. She'll be tough but fair with DHCD's development partners. Please vote in favor of her nomination.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Meg McGuire, welcome.
Thank you very much. I am Meg McGuire, Chair of the Northwest Opportunity Partners, CDC. Our mission is to reverse the historic racial inequities of removal and exclusion of Black residents in Ward 3 by expanding affordable housing and economic opportunities, and by sharing any benefits of our work with other community-led organizations citywide. In short, we seek to make Northwest DC and Ward 3 an economically and racially inclusive community, overcoming a history of racial covenants and racial segregation. We welcome Director Green as an ally in our mission. Her background and impressive track record in housing, finance, real estate, and community development bode well for her success in managing DHCD. To shore up confidence in the agency's transparency, we urge that she works with CNHED to ensure that the income goals of the Housing Production Trust Fund are met, and to erase any hint of favoritism in grant decisions. During the past year, Northwest Opportunity Partners has focused on the critical need to buy land on which to build affordable housing. Unless and until we acquire land, we will never be able to meet even a fraction of the mayor's goal of 1,990 units of new affordable housing in Ward 3 by 2025. We have consulted frequently with DMPED in drafting the Affordable Housing Property Acquisition Fund to acquire land in areas of the city that are deficient in affordable housing. Councilmember Matt Fruman has requested $100 million for this purpose in FY 2024, and we strongly urge that the mayor include it in her budget. Ward 3 is full of promise. Friendship Heights is redeveloping, educational institutions are expanding, and extensive planning is underway. In short, opportunities to create vibrant, diverse communities abound. Director Green, we are inviting you to take an opportunity tour of Friendship Heights in late April as your schedule permits. As you walk around this once thriving center, you will be astonished at the number of retail vacancies. the size of both the current WMATA garage and its future site at Lord and Taylor, and so much more. Friendship Heights is an opportunity waiting to happen. We ask you to become an active partner in Ward 3 so that those who work here can live here. Grocery workers, healthcare and childcare workers, beauticians and barbers, construction workers, teachers' aides, and those living on extremely low or fixed incomes. For this is the way to realize racial and economic equity in our city. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last public witness is Gina Boulette. And is it Boulette or Boulette? Please let me know.
It's Boulette. Can you hear me?
I can. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Councilmember White. It's always a pleasure. I want to tell you what it's like for a community to be treated as a box to be checked rather than one deserving of nuanced investment. Our small neighborhood of Northeast Boundary has persevered with too little for too long, being a safety net for many who have less and have experienced the worst out of life. We have been promised time and time again from our district government that we will receive the resources, opportunity, and dignity that has been long overdue. Yet, what we receive is the objectives and projects to fill quotas of district government agencies, not what we need for our community to thrive. DHCD behaves frequently in this way and is demonstrating no change in course under Acting Director Green's leadership. The first box. In September of 2022, we requested a meeting with DHCD about its lots on the 400 block of 61st Street Northeast. How DHCD checked the box? They promised to organize a meeting as they were gathering the appropriate staff. What actually happened? They never put together the meeting, nor responded to follow-up emails. They proceeded with their intention of selling the lots to some for a multifamily building without our community input. We found that out from some, not DHCD. The second box, it is my understanding that on February 13th, during a DHCD oversight hearing, the Acting Director Green committed to you that she would meet with us. She checked the box. Oh, we'll make sure to meet. In reality, we haven't heard a peep from her or anyone at DHCD. To add insult to injury, instead of meeting with us to discuss our lack of support for the proposed Dick Street residences, we received her decision letter. She checked the box as she, quote unquote, responded to our concerns. In reality, her letter was filled with errors that laid bare two things. One, DHCD does not know our community. Two, they have an unrelenting bias towards developers. Let's go over the errors. She referenced a project is in line with 7C's comprehensive plan recommendation, concentrate employment growth. Councilmember White, in a community with little to no critical amenities like a grocery store, retail shops, or even a coffee shop, this notion is taken out of context. Two, she referenced market studies that there are 4,300 to 5,700 senior households in our neighborhood eligible for senior housing, and the Carver Senior Apartments has a waiting list. However, Northeast Boundary has only a little over 2,000 residents. And the closest senior development, Capital Gateway, is 1 block over from the proposed development at 201 58th Street Northeast. She referenced the proposed developer has a strong community engagement plan and that they spoke to our Civic Association president and a former ANC leader multiple times. How did DHCD verify this? Acting Director Green didn't reach out to us. Is the developer calling our Civic Association president one time, maybe two, several years ago, saying that they wanted to do low-income senior apartments, and our president telling them, no, become apartments in our community due to the mix of housing that we already have. He never met with our community, nor Dr. Gaffney, about this development until the 30-day letter from DHCD came out, and he was told that he had to for the 7C vote. Then we got all kinds of phone calls and emails. Additionally, how is referencing a failed partnership between the developer and Beulah Baptist Church that left our neighborhood with broken promises an example of community engagement? Also, why had DHCD never reached out to the community to discuss putting out an RFP and what our needs are? She said that she read the LIG report and encouraged us to connect with the Eastbrook. The LIG report wasn't about the Eastbrook. It was about Eden Place. And more importantly, how DHCD and DemFed essentially wrote Mr. Nix a blank check despite poor performance. While these errors are only the tip of the iceberg, they clearly illuminate who Ms. Green will serve if she's confirmed, the developer. The mission of DHCD is to produce and preserve opportunities for affordable housing and economic development, and to revitalize underserved communities in the District of Columbia, not serve the interests of developers. We ask that you not support the confirmation of Director Green, and that you find someone to lead DHCD who knows that revitalizing underserved communities starts and ends with the self-determination of its residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for our first 5 witnesses, Shelby Johnson, Kevin Petty, Steve Glaudet, Abram Fetcher, Meg McGuire. Appreciate your testimonies. I'm going to ask the same question to each of you in the order you testify, which is, do you have any concerns about Ms. Green, or do you have any concerns about the agency that you hope she will focus on if she is confirmed? Shelby Johnson, let me start with you. Any concerns about Ms. Green or concerns with the agency you hope she'll focus on?
The only concern I really have is the where the money and the funding is going towards in terms of the monitoring and the surveillance cameras put around certain neighborhoods, such as the island dwellings and things like that. Because I know there's a lawsuit pending with that. I just have some concerns of how would that affect whichever way it goes. How will that affect her work in the community? Okay.
Does DHCD are they their cameras? What's the connection?
Oh no, so it's really DCHA. That's one of the concerns that I had been hearing from some of the members of the community. I just want to be sure that whatever the outcome would be, that it doesn't affect her already really strong work that she's been doing so far.
Okay, I appreciate that. I've heard concerns about cameras in public housing as well. Kevin Petty, any concerns about Ms. Green or concerns with the agency that you hope she'll focus on?
Well, I don't have any concerns with Ms. Green. I do have concerns with the agency, and I think a lot of the concerns that I have with the agency predates Ms. Green. You know, for us to be sitting here doing that. I think that
well, not to blame her, but to say, hey, if you're confirmed as the next director, I want you to focus here.
Oh, okay, yeah, yes, it's affordable housing for poor people. We're so caught up into wanting to create this mixed unit, this utopian of what community should look like, with people that are making a lot and people that are poor living together and everybody in between. That at the end of the day, that be the mission for creating affordable housing. And we could just look at what HUD and them does with the AMI on that particular level. Somehow poor people end up on the bottom end of that equation. So I want this agency to target housing and affordable housing for poor people. Moreover, just as I said earlier today, the urgency of it, because it's having a devastating effect physically and mentally on our whole poor community, right? The housing insecurity within itself. And so worrying about whether some development is mixed use or anything on that level still keeps poor people out. Okay, we somehow historically we always end up on the back end or the back of the line with this utopia thing. So I don't have
That's
any
a
problem. Right,
that's a
I don't
fair
have any
point.
problem with Miss Green. It's the agency.
Got it. I appreciate it. Mr. Glaude, I'm really happy to hear you testify that Director Green said she wants to meet with CNHED on an ongoing basis if she's confirmed. I think that'll be important. Do you have any concerns about Ms. Green or concerns with the agency that you hope she'll focus on if she's confirmed?
So do you have time for a really long cup of coffee? So I have no
coffee is empty now.
I have no concerns with Ms. Green. One thing I will share that I think reflects the kind of leader that she is. When we were talking about her new role, her potential new role and function, one of the things she shared with me was that she needed to kind of get up to speed on policy. That as the former chief of staff, she knew program, but that she would need to like really have some intentionality on how it translates to policy. I was comforted to hear her say that, but I also know that the beginning of policy is understanding programs, which she does. One feeds to the other, one leads to the other. So that was something that she herself lifted up. You know, I think, Mr. Chairman, we find ourselves in somewhat of a perfect storm moment. And if, for lack of a better way of saying it, the challenges that CNHED cares about, the agency focuses on, if we were to map it prior to the pandemic, as the mayor proposed and the council approved increases in the Housing Production Trust Fund, one of the challenges made to our field was to get up to scale. My member organizations that were doing one project a year were challenged to get to the point of maybe being able to do 2 or 3. And they did that by acquiring property, arranging financing, even dipping into their own reserves. And then all of a sudden the pandemic comes. And even though we are coming out of the pandemic, we're now facing challenges, as you well know, with the bond cap and what that means. So one of the things that I hope approved Director Green focuses on, and we talked about this, so I believe that she will, is how the bond cap, how the coordination with DCHFA around project criteria and selection that is triggered by the bond cap is going to impact the utilization of all of the other financing programs that include tax credits, that include the trust fund, and other things, so that we can keep the pipeline going. We have a number of organizations that and I should say that DHCD is beginning to address this, and I don't know full details, but one of the things we call for because of the slowdown in the pipeline was some type of holding fund. So our members went out and acquired properties. The pipeline has slowed down somewhat. We're not funding as many projects per round, or it looks like we're heading in that direction because of the bond cap. We don't want to lose these buildings, which could be lost permanently to affordability if we don't do some type of maintenance of them. And I believe DHCD in the last several weeks is beginning to act on that. So that is comforting. And so I think that if you look at all of the issues that the field is facing, that the agency is going to have to adjust to, I just think really looking at pipeline management, the bond cap issue. And I would also say that I hope both DHCD and DCHA, they've recently changed the scoring criteria. There's a new four criteria selection components, and that we pay attention to what we're learning from this change in criteria. With the last round that we made, so there were 8 projects that were approved based on the initial 4-point criteria. Only 3 projects advanced. And I know that there's some learning in that for the field in terms of how it prepares projects and applications for approval. I just think there needs to be a lot of communication and a lot of coordination between the field and the agencies, not just DHCD, but the housing agencies, to ensure that we have a seamless a process as possible, and one that we are learning from.
I appreciate that. Ms. McGuire, I'm sorry, Avram Fetcher, any concerns about Ms. Green or with the agency that you hope she'll focus on?
No, with Miss Green, certainly not. She, as I said earlier, she was a great boss. I really enjoyed working for her wholeheartedly. Can't wait to work with her again. I will say, as I've said in the testimony, but I'll expand a little bit. She's got some tough decisions ahead of her because of all the things that Stephen was talking about. I know she will make some policy decisions that I'm not going to agree with. No one ever does 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I have noticed working for her and then watching her over the years is even when I don't agree with the decision she's made, I can understand the rationale, how she got to where she did. So I might not agree with it, but I can understand it and respect it. So I expect there'll be a lot of that moving forward because there are no easy decisions before her right now, given all the things that I testified to and Mr. Claudet testified to. But I do know I will be able to respect her decisions, even though I might not agree with them all the time.
I appreciate it. And I probably apologize, Mr. Fector. I mispronounced your last name, which I apologize for. Ms. McGuire, any concerns on your end?
Well, I have a lot of concerns about the direction in which housing is going in the district. And I would urge the new director to really look at these and propose some major steps to remedy these. And that is that IZ is producing very, very little. As an example, the Carmel development at the missed opportunity at the Wardman Hotel, they are producing 900 units of housing, only 72 of which will be affordable. And that is affordable at a very high level. This is not what we need. We need to be creating a city in which families can live here, grow, and become citizens of this city. People who can love this city as much as we do and stay and invest their time and their talents in this city. And that's really not what's getting produced in large measure through current development policies. So I think this really needs to be looked at. How are we going to cultivate families and their lives in this city?
I appreciate that. One quick question on the acquisition fund idea. I recognize, most of us recognize, the city has never exercised its authority under the District Opportunity to Purchase Act. And that makes me wonder if we created an acquisition fund and put $100 million in there, would that essentially become $100 million that just isn't getting used for projects that could be brought online? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, yes, I do. The purpose of the acquisition fund is to enable the developers, the mission-driven developers in this city, to be able to go out and acquire properties for development as affordable housing. This is not to acquire existing housing. It's to acquire properties that can be used for affordable housing. And right now, we do not have that tool. So
you think the city wants to use that tool right now?
I hope so. We've been talking to the mayor's office quite a bit over the last year as we've tried to look at the situation. We're not going to get affordable housing here until we can have the land on which to develop it, because we do not have public land in Ward 3 on which to develop this housing. So, I think the program has got to be set up so that it's really flexible, so that these pre-approved teams can go out and acquire this land knowing that they are in line to get other kinds of funding. It's going to be tricky to set this up, but if we use CDFIs and other proven ways of administering this program, I believe that yes, that money can be spent. And I'll tell you, we can spend a lot of that, I believe, here in Ward 3.
Appreciate that. Ms. Boulette, let me ask a few specific questions because I want to make sure I fully understand your testimony. You mentioned Carver Senior Apartments has a waiting list. So I'm take that to mean there's a need for more senior housing. You mentioned the distance or proximity of Capitol Gateway. Help me connect those two to your testimony. You don't want more senior housing there?
So this is the challenge. She's referencing Carver Senior Housing, which I believe is down by Benning Road Metro Station. That's not even in our neighborhood. She doesn't even realize, or doesn't even, because she doesn't reference it. It makes me question if she realizes she is putting this Dick Street Residences one block over from Capitol Gateway, which is already senior housing. What we expect is what other neighborhoods get is that we have a mix of development. She's saying, well, there's 4,300 to 5,700 senior households that are eligible. Hasn't even assessed their need or desire for senior housing, but are eligible. But they're not in Northeast Boundary. So why are you putting an additional senior residence in the very tiny community of Northeast Boundary when there are so many other neighborhoods that don't have affordable senior housing? Yeah. What we continue to experience is that all of the affordable housing projects come through in our community, but the other things that we need to make our residents well, to make their lives whole, to make things easier, and so that our residents who live in all of our residences in Northeast Boundary have a good quality of life. Those things never come through.
Yeah. I hear that, and I think you're right. I have felt that way about my neighborhoods in the past. The challenge that I'm trying to sort through, if the agency should be engaging communities and listening to communities. I don't think there's a scenario in which the community would have the last word, because if there are citywide needs and every neighborhood says, no, not here, at some point, they're going to have to put whatever the use is somewhere. Very sensitive to the overconcentration issue you're raising. But what is your thought about how much the input of a neighborhood goes into the final decision? Do you think the neighborhood should make the final decision, or that their input should be considered in the final decision?
It doesn't at all, Councilmember White. We never heard from DHCD about this. They put out an RFP. How do you know what a community needs if you don't talk to the community? And I totally get it. Well, what if every neighborhood says not me, then what do you do? But that's not our story. If you look at the comp plan, Ward 7 does more than its share with affordable housing.
Right.
What I think that's is the other things that we need.
Yeah, I hear you. I do hear you. And that is absolutely right. I think we're hearing more communities in Wards 7 and 8, among others, saying, okay, we've gotten a lot of affordable housing. We need other things. And I think we're hearing communities like Ward 3 say, look, we're not carrying our fair share of affordable housing, and that is something we absolutely have to figure out. Now, the result is that we will produce less affordable housing with the same amount of money because it's going to cost more in Ward 3, but we have an obligation to spread these citywide needs across the city. So I do hear you. I will note one thing that I'm working on to try to address affordable housing is my Common Ground bill, which revamps how the city develops public lands. I want to see development on public lands be led by the community, similar to what you were saying. Let the community be a stakeholder, a real stakeholder, and what we ultimately decide to put somewhere, take that plan to the development community. Don't let the development community create a plan and then go to the community and say, this is the plan. So we really have got to revamp how we do development on public lands. But to your point, Ms. Boulette, we need to make sure we are not continuing to over-concentrate the same uses. Let me get the last word to Meg McGuire, and then we're going to move to our nominee.
Just briefly on the subject of public land. Here in Ward 3, the redevelopment of the Chevy Chase Library and Recreation Center, instead of coming to plan with the community, the DMPED has come to, in effect, surplus and dispose of that land, giving the planning function over to a chosen developer. That's not the way to do it. Let's give that planning function over to a master planning firm that works with the community and with those two institutions to come up with the plan, not surplus and dispose of this. And I really hope that the council will not agree to that if DMPED plans to pursue it. It's not the best.
Appreciate that. That's what you just discussed is exactly how all of the surplus and dispositions go, and that's what we're hoping to redo. I want to thank you all for your testimonies. When we're talking about appointing a permanent agency director, that matters. So hearing voices from the community and organizations that work with the relevant agency is particularly important here. So thank you very much for being part of this process and for your time this morning.
Thank you.
We're going to turn, and let me just say to as we wrap that up, I did hear, Ms. Boulette, that the promised meeting with the neighborhood you say didn't happen. I'm curious why it didn't happen, so we're going to have to ask the acting director about that. But we will at this term turn up to our nominee. I will be happy. We'll follow up with you, Ms. Boulette. We are going to try to get to the bottom of this. Let me give you a moment to say something. Go ahead.
Oh, we would like for you to attend with us at that meeting.
Okay. Which means we got to get that meeting happening. So we will give a moment to have Colleen Green join us.
Morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being with us today. As you know from your oversight hearing, it is the practice of this committee to put our government witnesses under oath. So I ask that you raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Housing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Well, again, welcome and good morning, and you can begin your testimony.
Good morning, Chairperson White and members of the staff of the Committee on Housing. I am Colleen Green, the Acting Director of the Department of Housing and Community Development. I'm honored to have been nominated by Mayor Muriel Bowser to lead DHCD, and I'm truly excited to serve the mayor and the residents of the District of Columbia by helping to spearhead the administration's housing agenda. I welcome the opportunity to discuss my background, experience, and vision for the agency. Personally, I consider myself a DC native. My parents met at a Howard University party and were married at Rankin Chapel. I was born at Freeman's Hospital, which is today known as Howard University Hospital. My family ties run deep in the district, including my niece, aunts, and uncles, cousins, and my 105-year-old grandmother, who still lives in the house that she raised us in. I spent my college years and some of my career elsewhere, but I've never been away from my family or the district for long. It is an honor to receive this nomination and to return to DHCD, where I served as the Chief of Staff from 2007 through 2009. I come to this position with an extensive and multifaceted experience in government, finance, real estate, management, and compliance. I have worked at several premier lending institutions, operated my own property management and construction management companies, and was a partner at a real estate development firm. My background qualifies me to understand our city's affordable housing challenges in a very comprehensive way. From the concerns of the residents, the tenants, the activists, and the various stakeholder groups that partner with DHCD to create affordable housing that our city so desperately needs. Through my career path, I have worked on behalf of district residents implementing affordable housing policy that benefits all of us. I've worked on the development of over 2,000 units of housing to serve residents and families who need a safe and comfortable place to call home, as well as manage the acquisition and dispositions for a $60 million national real estate investment fund that took the risk of acquiring and selling housing on behalf of real estate investors. I have created housing for all income levels, including for our most vulnerable populations, such as returning citizens, individuals, and families experiencing homelessness and youth aging out of foster care. I come to this position with a deep understanding of the city and the residents that I serve. As you know, the mission of the Department of Housing and Community Development is to produce and preserve affordable housing for low and moderate income residents and to revitalize underserved neighborhoods in the District of Columbia. I was very excited to accept this appointment as I have observed the good work and many innovations the agency has realized under Mayor Bowser's leadership. Since the start of the Bowser administration in 2015, the Housing Production Trust Fund has provided gap financing to projects that have produced and preserved over 8,000 affordable housing units. The overwhelming majority of this historic amount of funding went to finance units affordable to households earning less than 50% of area median income for a family of four. In fiscal year 22, 85% of Housing Production Trust Fund went to projects at 50% of AMI and below. This was only possible due to Mayor Bowser keeping her commitment to the fund to fund the Housing Production Trust Fund at a minimum of $100 million annually, which has established Washington, D.C. as a national leader in affordable housing investment. Another trailblazing effort that started as a concept that was recommended by a group of experts convened by the mayor is the creation of the agency's preservation unit. This is highlighted by the establishment of the district's first preservation fund that has used government dollars to leverage private resources, creating a twin $100 million fund. Since the fund began operations in 2019, over 2,350 affordable units have been preserved, and now as the loans are repaid, the dollars are starting to revolve into a second generations of projects as intended. As Black homeownership remains a major priority for the administration and the department, the agency implemented changes on multiple occasions to the Home Purchase Assistance Program to help residents in a very competitive home sales market. To that end, early in this administration, the maximum HPAP down payment and closing cost assistance was increased from $50,000 to $80,000. Further, at the start of the fiscal year, the maximum award amount was increased to $202,000 to make sure district residents seeking home ownership have real buying power to seek homes in all 8 wards. This is in line with the Mayor Bowser's commitment to create 20,000 new Black homeowners by 2030. I firmly believe that housing stabilizes neighborhoods. Further, improving neighborhoods through the creation of housing, community development, and economic activities is key to addressing poverty alleviation, improving the quality of life of residents. Financing affordable housing and creating sustainable neighborhoods makes DHCD a pivotal agency in reversing negative outcomes in communities around the district. DHCD does this in several ways, including through housing and community development finance, where DHCD provides gap financing. That is the reason affordable housing projects become a reality. Also, through affordable housing preservation, DHCD creates real impact in the number of affordable housing units available for district residents. It is imperative that we preserve and not lose the existing affordable rental and owner-occupied housing units that have already been created, and that we continue to make investments needed to keep these buildings properly maintained and safe for residents. Additionally, through our home ownership and housing counseling programs, DHCD's first-time home buyer programs and other resident-facing programs run through our community-based organization partners who have provided housing counseling services to low and moderate income residents to ensure that they are ready for the responsibility of home ownership. This is particularly important for Black homeowners that have historically been shut out of the opportunity to own their own homes. Through housing regulation and inclusionary zoning, DHCD plays a regulatory role in administering the Rental Housing Act, the Condominium Conversion and Sales Act, and inclusionary zoning to implement the needs and rights of tenants. We also provide funding for facade improvement and small business technical assistance and the creation of community facilities, which are part of our community and economic development activities. Since assuming this role, I've seen the agency that has come a long way since I was previously here. However, I know we cannot be complacent given the challenges ahead of us. I have therefore initiated an assessment of the agency's existing programs, processes, and procedures to see what is working well and to uncover opportunities for improvement. I have planned initiatives on how to make improvements that will align with both human capital and budgetary resources and the mayor's overall affordable housing agenda. This will be an ongoing effort, but I also want to recognize that the agency has been a major contributor toward meeting more than half of the very bold affordable housing goal that the mayor set in 2019 to achieve by 2025. The pandemic did not stop the good people in this agency from working towards the district's housing goals. Instead, our team was reinvigorated by the ever more critical need that the circumstances of the pandemic presented. Building on the skills I have developed over 26 years in government, real estate development, construction lending, finance, as well as operations and management, my focus will continue to be on further process improvements, education, and outreach efforts that will make the agency more responsive and accessible to residents. My background positions me well to play a critical role in continuing to deliver on the mayor's goal of producing 12,000 new units of affordable housing by 2025, within the larger goal of 36,000 new units of housing for district residents at every income level. Among my varied career experience, I was a partner and development officer in a real estate development firm, A&F Commercial Builders, that focused on the creation of affordable housing. My responsibilities included negotiating deal terms with lenders, government agencies, and investors. I was also responsible for the property and asset management of the company's holdings. Following that experience, I was able to learn from and participate in various complex financing structures among various asset classes by working as vice president at financial institutions such as Key Bank, Fleet Bank, and Bank of America, where my responsibilities range from senior portfolio manager to relationship underwriter and client manager. I also manage acquisitions and dispositions for the Growth Fund, an initiative by the National Community Reinvestment Coalition to promote home ownership for low to moderate income families. As we are all aware, the Housing Production Trust Fund, which DHCD manages, has been the district's key affordable housing resource. Since the start of the Bowser administration in 2015, this fund has produced gap financing to projects that have produced and preserved over 8,000 affordable housing units. I'm committed to ensuring that HPTF dollars are utilized even more efficiently to realize housing opportunities for the target AMI levels and home ownership opportunities for Black owners in the district who lag behind in the acquisition of this vehicle for generational wealth. Since I've worked in the district government before, I'm familiar with the web of agencies, nonprofit organizations, and developers that are all critical to effectively implementing our existing programs and come up with creative solutions that ensure that our resources are being used to create housing opportunity for those in need. For example, we are implementing a new project-based local rent supplement program budgeting process, specifically designed to efficiently deliver homes for extremely low-income households, those earning 30% of AMI or less, in a much more efficient way. We expect this proactive budget planning tool to deliver more affordable units for this population in a process that is more user-friendly. Finally, I'm committed to transparency, improvement, and innovation. I look forward to working with stakeholders, our housing agency partners, lenders, members of the council, and residents to create and deliver housing for all in the nation's capital. I'm looking forward to the implementation of new initiatives, such as the creation of affordable housing units across all 8 wards, particularly in high-cost, high-opportunity areas. I look forward to inviting people searching for a home or that have any questions related to housing back to our revamped Housing Resource Center. Most importantly, I'm eager to be on the forefront of conversations and solutions for housing and community development in the district. I would like to thank Mayor Bowser for appointing me and trusting me with the awesome responsibility of leading the Department of Housing and Community Development. I'm grateful to be able to work with the dedicated staff at DHCD as we continue to see this agency lead the nation in innovative, affordable housing programming. As we navigate the district and its unique challenges, I assure you that I will spend each day working to improve the equity, accessibility, and affordability of housing options for residents across our city. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. So let me start with a concern. Lots of positive testimony in support of your nomination, which we are very happy to receive. I will say I was very impressed with you at the performance oversight hearing, which was really days after you started, and I felt like you had a particularly good grasp of the agency. In the brief time we worked together, I've appreciated that work. There was one resident who testified with serious concerns that I want to make sure we address with the Northeast Boundary Civic Association, Ms. Boulette. First concern is she says she's having she says their community is having a lot of difficulty meeting with DHCD about a project in their neighborhood. Can you talk about that difficulty, whether the agency has or plans to meet with the Northeast Boundary Civic Association?
Yes, council member. I just want to say that shortly after our hearing, I did receive and respond to a great weight letter from the ANC. It was a joint letter with that group and the ANC. We responded to that letter on March 6th and are waiting for communication with regard to a follow-up meeting with them from that letter. So the response was to the letter. We are happy to meet and following up and answering any more specific questions. I'm an open door and would love to engage in discussions.
So how should they go about setting up a meeting with you?
They can contact my office. They can reach out to myself, to Drew Hubbard, to Pamela Hilsman, who's also responsible for scheduling for the agency. Happy to, again, we can reach out to them directly as well after today if that has been a problem with them reaching us, and I'll make sure that happens.
I appreciate it. If you or your team would reach out to Ms. Boulette, I think that would help get things going. If you all don't have her contact information, the committee has it, so we can get it to you. And I appreciate that. What are your thoughts on the idea of over concentrating, whether it's senior homes there or affordable housing in other parts of the city? What's DHCD's role in balancing the broader needs for the city with the needs for specific neighborhoods?
So DHCD's role in these development projects are really specifically about gap financing. So often when we get the projects, we're getting a number of projects that have been considered. There has already been some level of community engagement. There's been zoning conversations with the Department of Planning and the Board of Zoning and Appeals, all which require some level of community engagement as well. So we get the projects fully proposed for the location, the number of units, and our gap financing is sort of the part of the financing that makes the project affordable. But in terms of that, we do look for the community engagement plan that has been submitted as part of the application. If there are any concerns that a organization has, specifically, we do address it with the developer, but we're really sort of in the last position in terms of community engagement. But going forward, happy to discuss and work with communities about what is in our pipeline, which is public on our website as well, about where projects are, where they're going. That is available on our website.
Who's the ultimate decision maker on projects? Is it DHCD or Office of Planning, DMPED? Who's the ultimate decision maker?
So there's a combination of things that happen along the way. The projects have a journey, I would say, from conception until entitlement, and whether they're acquiring a site. Ultimate decision maker on how DHCD's funding is applied lies with the director of DHCD.
Okay.
But again, when the projects come into the RFP, they are coming into the RFP. One of our requirements is their readiness to be to start construction. So a lot of the work in terms of location, what they're planning in terms of affordability is done. Of course, we have the opportunity to say we would like more deeply affordable units in a project in terms of what we can bring to bear by providing that gap financing.
So by the time a project gets to DHCD, is it too late to change the project based on community feedback?
There might be some opportunity around conversations around the edges, but a lot of that community work should have really been done up front before it even comes to DHCD.
So my concern here, and I'm going to move on for now. My concern is that if agencies are working in silos, then what tends to happen is nobody sees themselves as the lead agency, and the community doesn't get responded to because everyone can say, well, it's not my role. And that is something we have to figure out. We have needs around the city, whether it's halfway houses or senior housing. Please go ahead.
So DHCD has several touch points in which we hear from the community as well. We hear from them when we're putting together our comprehensive plan, our consolidated plans, and we open it to the community to make comment and to work with the staff at DHCD about what they'd like to see. Also, when we're putting forth our qualified allocation plan, our QAP, our qualified allocation plan for tax credits, that's another opportunity for the community to make comment about what they would like to see with our funding sources as well. So there's a number of ways. When DHCD puts out an RFP or request for some of our vacant and blighted properties from the property acquisition disposition, for example, we actually do go out to the community and ask what they would like to see before we release the RFP and get their comments as well. So to the extent that we put something out as an agency, we do seek community feedback.
Well, let me say this, as you think about processes and reforms for the agency, DMPED would say and does say that they have public meetings and not a lot of people go to them or at least testify. And they say they receive community input, but it seems clear that for DMPED, they've already made decisions before they open a meeting to community. So what we want to make sure, and where we will scrutinize the agency in the future, is, is this check the box community engagement, or is this real community engagement where there's a meaningful opportunity for residents to be heard, that they know and can access the meeting, and that there's a real opportunity for their comments to be taken into account. As I said to Ms. Billette, the community can't make the ultimate decision, but there should be some room for their concerns to be taken into the planning and processes.
I completely agree with you.
I appreciate that. Let me start on a line of questions about just your leadership on the agency, and then I'll pause during this to recognize my colleague, Councilmember Parker. Have you've been acting director of DHCD since the end of January? Have you set any goals for yourself or the agency at this point?
Yes, I have set a few goals for myself and the agency. One of the goals, as you mentioned, is letting people understand what the agency is and to have a more direct resource and be in conversation with the community a little more readily. So that is one of the goals. I'm actually happy that you brought that up. And that is opening and revamping our Housing Resource Center, as I mentioned in the testimony, to be a place where people can come directly and answer questions or call and have get feedback very quickly, and just to make sure that we're responsive from a sort of one-stop shop approach. So that is one of the goals. Additionally, looking through the pipeline and figuring out where we are in terms of process and procedures, and making sure that we can close as many projects as we can as efficiently and quickly as possible. The other opportunity that I would say I'm looking at is establishing a strike force team, an implementation team that can kind of work through all our processes and procedures, look at things that are needed, and to right size and streamline where we can. Also, I would like to establish some advisory councils in terms of our different stakeholder groups, so that they can inform the agency about what they're seeing in the market in real time, and just meet with them regularly so we can understand sort of the pressures around community development activities, whatever is happening in terms of the interest rate, other ideas that we can come up with as resources may be challenged going forward. So I'd like to establish that sort of group. And the last thing I would say that has come up is looking at our small business offerings. And I think that we've kind of been doing those in the same way for some time, and seeing if there are needs around small business technical assistance in terms of revitalizing our communities and improving our neighborhoods, in terms of like what is offered and how we can help more businesses establish themselves in the communities.
I appreciate that. Let me pause there and recognize my colleague, Ward 5 Council Member Zachary Parker. Do you have an opening statement or just questions?
No statement, just questions.
All right. Well, we're doing 10-minute rounds, so welcome. Glad to have you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chairman White. And it's good to see you, Ms. Green. I will start by saying happy belated birthday. I saw in your responses that your birthday just passed, and we happen to share a birthday. So wanted to start there. I want to pick up where you left off with Chairman White in terms of the goals, and to put it separately.
I can't hear you. I think it's him. I can't.
Can you not hear me?
I can hear you, Councilmember Parker. So we have a small tech issue. Let's pause for a moment. And Director Green, can you hear me, Director Green?
Testing.
I can hear you.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, just to kind of recap, I wanted to pick up where Chairman White left off in terms of the goals. That was really helpful to hear you detail what you're hoping to push toward with the agency. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing the agency? And that obviously is connected to the goals you laid out, but more specifically, the challenges that you believe lie ahead.
So one of the biggest challenges, I think, that DHCD is largely misunderstood about what its role is in affordable housing, financing, and how it works, and how actually the sausage gets made, so to speak. And one of the things that I would like to put forth is some opportunity for education and outreach, both as we work together, council members to agency, as well as to district residents. What the agency actually provides, how the sausage gets made, what our roles is, and who, if you have a particular question, we want to be the one-stop sort of resource for if you have an issue with your house. It may not be our agency, but we can connect you directly with the agency that takes care of that. So that's sort of the challenge that I would like to address immediately.
Okay, that is helpful. I want to delve deeply into specific areas, and if you can just frame your vision for addressing these issues and or the specific actions the agency may already be taking. And so the first is with the homeowner assistance fund. We've received correspondence from a neighbor in particular in Ward 5 who would say that communication from the agency said that they were approved, things were cleared, there was a green light, but then they still got a foreclosure notice on their home, and they've been going back and forth. And in fact, as recent as, I want to say this morning, there was another email where now there's a foreclosure hearing for this resident, and she's desperately asking for support, clarity, and communication from the agency. While you may not have at your fingertips information about that specific case, can you talk through your vision for closing the loopholes with the fund and the process to make sure that these gaps don't occur? And then secondly, how can we support this neighbor in particular as she is facing a foreclosure hearing and is still awaiting to hear from the agency?
Yes, I've spent some time on this as that's been one of the major communications that I've been getting from residents since starting here. There's a number of steps in the process. Vendor registration is one of them. So it may be that her particular bank or whoever she's working with is not registered in sort of the new agency, the Chief Financial Officer's payment system. We've been working really diligently to make sure vendors are registered and getting that information. Today on our website, actually, coincidentally, we'll be putting an update and information about where we are in half payments. We've been making some strides into processing a number of the payments. So anyone that also has a foreclosure notice or any kind of notice that says that they are in imminent danger of being evicted or action being taken, if they were approved through half, they should have gotten a letter that says they were approved, and that this letter should be enough for them to stave off any action. Now, if they are still getting notices about moving forward with foreclosure or any kind of action, they should contact our agency so that we can contact those vendors directly.
Okay, that is helpful. And you kind of tackle both questions in one. So I will have my team follow up with you all today to see what can be done for this neighbor. And there has been communication. It just seems like whatever communication is needed for the court system or the mortgage company is not reaching them in time. So I'm hoping something can happen there. And what I'm hearing you say is that there may be discrepancies in the vendors being registered, as well as you all are posting more information on your website, which will let, I'm assuming, the applicant know where they are in the process or what money has been dispersed.
And also the applicant should also check their emails with which they registered with their application, because we send out regular updates and notices on that email. So they will, be getting regular updates on where they are.
Okay. It is my understanding that this may not be a one-off situation. So as much as you all can do an inventory around just communication processes, I think that would be important. But thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely.
You kind of broke up there. I think you said that's in process.
That's in process. So people will be receiving text, robocalls regularly going forward about the status of the HAF program and where their payments are.
Okay. I wanted to switch gears in my remaining minutes to talk about the Housing Production Trust Fund. You talked about it, and many would describe it as a success for the city. As you know, in years past, there's been audits, reports from the Inspector General that just talked about how the money that has been dedicated for that fund is actually not reaching the folk that it's intended or purported to support. And can you just give us a status of where we are now and what safeguards you envision putting into place to make sure more of the money from the Housing Production Trust Fund actually goes to low-income resident housing?
Okay. As I mentioned in my testimony, more than half of the Housing Production Trust Fund goes to households making 50% of AMI and below. One of the challenges that happens is that the Housing Production Trust Fund has a challenge sort of meeting the 30% and below category. But we do that not just through Housing Production Trust Fund dollars. We do that through a balance of other funding sources, local rent supplement dollars as well. And so by combining these different funding sources, we can use Housing Production Trust Fund dollars to sort of spread across all of the income levels that need to be funded. So I would love to work with the committee sort of on looking at the numbers of 30% and below that the agencies actually funded as compared to how the house.
I think you broke up, Director Green, if you can hear me.
Housing Production Trust Fund dollars are questioned. We are reaching that number of different resources that are available to that income group that are not available to other. I think we're for. Yeah.
Director, if you could just check your internet signal, you're going in and out.
Do you need which part?
You don't have to repeat it.
Where
but
did we leave off?
You're glitching, and so you would freeze for part of it. And I'm going to just try and squeeze in a quick follow-up. And it's just more about like what steps or safeguards are you envisioning putting into place to make sure that both we are doing right by neighbors with the Housing Production Trust Fund, and to your point, we can get more of that money to the lowest income neighbors in the city.
So we are trying to, I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Is that better?
Yes, I hear you.
All right, sorry about that. So the safeguards, we track how we're funding each of the categories. We've actually funded a significant number of the lowest level of 30% and below, which is sort of the question that comes up a lot. And the reason Housing Production Trust Fund dollars tends to not be delivered in the same levels to that income group as opposed to the other income groups, because there are a number of other resources that are available to 30% of and below, like
No,
operating.
I do get that. So just to quickly read some of the, and this is an outdated audit report, but DHCD did not ensure that housing production trust fund projects were actually creating affordable units. The agency did not ensure that projects were adequately and consistently screening households for income certification. There was no enforcement for the requirement that projects submit annual household income certifications, and the list goes on. And so I know my time is ticking here, but it would be helpful if very specifically you could spell out your vision for the action steps the agency will take moving forward to ensure these funds are being used properly, but also reaching more of our lowest income neighbors.
So with every decision memo that comes to me, I actually look at where our housing production trust fund is applied to in terms of units and their income level. So I know before I sign off how the housing production trust fund is applied. From my research, since 2017, approximately, no housing production trust fund units have funded anything more than 50% of AMI. So the housing production trust fund is going towards that level and below. So it's interesting. I do know that there was some disagreement with the audit report. I wasn't part of that group, but my research has showed that there has not been funding outside of the housing production trust fund levels.
But that is my time. But there are other reports from the Inspector General that suggest that that is actually not the case and that is not happening. And so I don't want to hold you accountable to things that may have happened in the past. But again, if as a follow-up, you can just talk about the steps you're going to take. And one last thing I would say, Chairman White, thank you for the extra 10 seconds. One of the things that was noted was the discretion given to the director to do the sort of approval that you are talking about versus going by the criteria for the fund itself. And so that was actually flagged as a concern. So again, I look forward to receiving that and we'll share it. If you could share with the entire committee, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, I will be happy to talk about that some more with you and make sure we get on the same page about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. So back to really line of leadership questions. One of the things I will be asking you about in the budget hearing and on an ongoing basis, and we were talking about setting goals in my previous round. One of the things I'll be really interested to know is how you check progress toward those goals. So that'll be something that we discuss in the future as you continue to solidify your goals. One of the other things I'm particularly sensitive to these days is there's been a lot of transition in employment. So many of our agencies have a lot of vacancies for various reasons. But having a healthy work environment helps us to retain good employees. And so one of my questions is, what steps are you taking or do you plan to take to foster a healthy work environment at DHCD for employees?
Well, I think having been an employee for a long time now, I think communication around decisions, how they're made, transparency, understanding what is coming in terms of direction, positivity, collaboration, all those things are really important in creating a healthy work environment. I think sort of when people are sort of hit with decisions they didn't know were coming or not understanding, and also an ability to have input, right, into how the agency is working, what is affecting them on a day-to-day basis. So I meet regularly with the staff. I plan to continue doing that. I have an open door policy. walk around. I talk to people in general, see how they're doing. I like to know how people are doing personally as well as professionally, because, you know, our home life is most important, honestly. And so if there's something that is challenging, I like to address it for them. So to me, that's a healthy work environment. I really feel like while I'm the director, I'm not inaccessible. I'm part of the team. I'm the captain of the team, but we're all playing ball. So if I got to throw you a shot, I hope you catch it. If I got to, you know, back you up and do the rebound, I'm going to be there to catch it. So that's how I kind of approach working at DHCD.
Somewhat overlaps with your response on that question, but what would you say is your leadership style?
My leadership style is clear, fair, compassionate, and communicative. That's what I would say.
In your pre-hearing responses, you shared that at one organization, you received a few employee complaints that were, as you said, part of the regular course of business that managers address with employees from time to time. Sometimes, obviously, day-to-day matters can have a major impact on employees' experiences in the workplace and impact retention. When there are concerns brought to you about leadership in the agency below you, how do you intend to address those concerns?
So that has actually happened so far, and I tend to bring everyone into the room to try to solve it. I mean, that's sort of my first approach. I kind of want to, it's collaborative in terms of trying to find a solution. I like to bring all the parties involved. I kind of, you know, the whole pointing fingers and the complaint things and anonymous complaints, those are all something that I feel can be debilitating to the culture. So I try to get everyone in conversation and having ownership in the solution. This is not my agency, it's our agency. It's the agency of the district residents, and we all work for the mayor. So that is what I put forth. And so with that, we're a team to try to solve the problem. And that's how I approach it.
Last question in this line, so somewhat overlapped. What is DHCD's internal grievance process?
Okay. So the internal grievance process is they file a complaint with their manager. They cannot resolve it with their manager. And we're a union shop as well, so they may file a complaint with the union stewards. We address the complaints if they're in writing. Those complaints are addressed by the managers on up to the chief administrative officer. I tend to sort of in the last line of any official complaint in terms of the appeal process. And we also work in conjunction with our general counsel and DCHR as needed in terms of complaints as well, if it's not something that we can handle internally.
We'll move to more DHCD programs and implementation. What are your top goals for carrying out DHCD's mission if you're confirmed as director?
My top goals are to make sure that the programs are reaching the district residents with efficiency and alacrity, to make sure that residents understand what we are offering and what's available to them, to create as much affordable housing as possible for people that are in need of affordable housing, that they know where to come, where to get it, how to get on the waiting list, how to find that housing for themselves, to work collaboratively with our housing agency partners to create affordable housing, to work and use the tools that we have at DHCD to create equity partnerships, so that people to bring more developers, more contractors, more economic development activities that we can provide to create economic opportunity as well.
And what do you see as the biggest hurdles in accomplishing those goals?
There are a lot of rules and regulations that sometimes conflict. There are timing challenges with regard to getting through processes. Again, we are sort of the last line. We are the gap financing agency. A lot happens before a project can close and get into the ground. So we don't want to be in the way of any of that. We try to do our analysis in tandem with other things are going on, work with our housing agency partners to get to a closing. So working on those things to figure out how to streamline the process, maybe taking steps out of it that aren't necessary, working in conjunction with other partners in the district to move things along as they touch on different projects. Those are things that I would like to really see done.
For those issues, streamlining, making the processes work, predictability, are these the types of things that you plan to bring working groups together around?
Absolutely. That is exactly what the idea about the advisory councils and groups like that.
I'm very happy to hear that. You were at DHCD before as chief of staff from 2007 to 2009. So you have a point of comparison. Are there ways that you think that the agency is doing better now than it was then? And is there anything that you think the agency might have lost in time that you hope to get back?
I think the agency is doing a lot of really great things. There's been a lot of new programming efforts to reach the high opportunity, high cost areas is very new and important. So yes, there's some things that I would like to see come back. There are some things that, but there's a great number of improvements that have been made.
Well, I mean, one of the specific things that's a big thing though is affordable housing production. You shared a story in your pre-roundtable responses that as a middle school student, you would pass visibly homeless people in vacant abandoned buildings and sort of, conclude that math didn't work. That is a good perspective for the role that you hold now. It's a time where we are putting a lot of money into affordable housing, but we are not meeting the need at this point. What's your philosophy on affordable housing production, or your hope for where we will be, let's say, if you're confirmed within 2 to 4 years?
So I would like to streamline the process. I would like to be in conversations earlier with developers that are thinking about projects, about putting them in the RFP, and helping sort of sort out some of those issues, concerns that may come up early and trying to address them. I would also like to just sort of really figure out, are there different products, different platforms, strategies, financing structures that we can use the Housing Production Trust Fund for to sort of make it stretch the dollar, so to speak, and keep the interest rates down, keep the cost down? How can we, do different things and think out of the box in terms of keeping the cost down for development and creating more affordable housing?
Pause there. Councilmember Parker, do you have questions?
Yes. I just wanted to come back very quickly to the Housing Production Trust Fund conversation and just to get some clarity and commitments. And I'm looking at the 2021 Inspector General's report, which details some $81+ million was misused. So again, it is not accurate to suggest that since 2017, the fund has been operating as designed. More specifically, though, can you give a time frame when you might be able to share your vision around the guardrails to ensure that more of the resources of the Housing Production Trust Fund get to where they are intended?
So I think that one one of the things that I want to do is kind of do our education and outreach sessions and conversations around sort of how the sausage gets made, and then work with the council members to come up with guardrails that they, think make sense. Again, for me, when I look at signing off on a decision memo, I will look to make sure that our Housing Production Trust Fund dollars, as per statute, are funding affordable housing units. And just to clarify what I said before, what I have found from the pipeline is that new construction projects have been funded at 50% and below by Housing Production Trust Fund. However, there are some preservation projects that might have been a little higher towards the 80%. But Housing Production Trust Fund dollars by statute are not allowed to fund anything more than 80%. So I'm having a challenge sort of looking for those units that were actually funded more than 80% of Housing Production Trust Fund. So, but yes, I agree that there should be safeguards to ensure that it never happens. And I would like to work with you to come up with what those are. But from my standpoint, when I sign off on a decision memo, I see how the Housing Production Trust Fund dollars are being funded. They tell me which units are being funded and at what level they're being funded. And I sign off on that.
And I appreciate that. And I welcome the invitation to work together. I would say, though, I would welcome better understanding what your vision is for the agency. I'm sure the committee is happy to work together. And so again, I'm going to ask, is there a time frame that one might expect some documentation like this is the vision for the Housing Production Trust Fund moving forward?
Sure, I could put something together for you, and I could do that within, say, 30 days.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I want to switch gears briefly to talking about Black home ownership. I know it's a goal of the mayor's. You talked about it in your opening statement, and it's something that I think many of us on the committee, if not all of us on the committee, support and applaud and believe it's important. How are you tracking, or in what ways are you supporting the tracking of these individuals coming into the market, for the lack of a better way of putting it?
We're tracking demographics of how our funds are affected by all demographics.
Oh, but specifically for Black homeowners, is there any data piece that the agency is looking at, pointing to say, yes, we're on the right track as a city towards meeting this goal that the mayor has set?
So HPAP is one of the major tools that we use for homeowners, for Black homeownership. We track the demographics for how many people, or what are the demographics for that. We track the demographics for the single family residential rehab program. As the AIRS program rolls out, we will be tracking the demographics for that as well. So that's how we will know how many Black homeowners.
Awesome. Thank you. That is helpful. That has been a question I've received and I didn't quite know how to answer. So that is helpful to be able to point to those metrics. And then I want to, as you're thinking about engaging the community, how can the committee support the work that you're doing, or the council at large support the work that you're doing in building residents' understanding of the agency?
Well, I think that joining us on community events that we're having and outreach activities that we're having, especially ones that affect your ward and your constituents, would be really, really helpful. And we would love to do that in tandem.
Okay. I am happy to do that. I appreciate your engagement. Those were the high-level questions. Again, I'm going to follow up about the neighbor in Ward 5 that is having the foreclosure hearing this week in hopes that something can be done. And I will look out for more information just on the agency's attention to the Housing Production Trust Fund. But really appreciate you taking time to answer some questions. And I'm going to yield back. I'm going to yield back the rest of my time, Chairman White.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Parker. Very much appreciate your engagement here. Let me actually pick up on a thread Councilmember Parker was discussing which is the Housing Production Trust Fund. Obviously, first, reporting on DHCD's use of Housing Production Trust Fund money is legally required. It's also imperative to ensuring progress on affordable housing production and preservation. The agency has been out of compliance with its mandate to publish annual HPTF reports since fiscal year 2016. If you are confirmed, will you make completing these annual reports a priority for the agency?
Absolutely, sir. You will have one on April 1st.
Thank you. DHCD, and this is what Councilmember Parker was mentioning. Let me ask a quick follow-up. The reports for fiscal years 2016 through fiscal year 2021, when will the council receive those annual reports?
I know my staff is working on them. There were, just so that you know what's available, there are annual audited reports available as well, and quarterly reports available on our website currently. So those are available in case there's information that is needed in the interim. In terms of the missing Housing Production Trust Fund reports for years prior to fiscal year 2022, we will work on that and get that to you within the next 90 days.
That'd be perfect. Thank you.
But you will have the fiscal year 2020 report will be to you on April 1st.
Great. Thank you. And so DHCD has historically not spent the legally required percentage of HPTF money for families making 30% of the area median income or less. During the DHCD performance oversight hearing in February, Deputy Director Drew Hubbard confirmed that DHCD's Office of Program Monitoring Division, or OPM, handles front-end compliance for DHCD programs. Is OPM responsible for ensuring compliance of HPTF spending?
No, OPM is really responsible for our federal compliance around our community development block grant funds and our home funds, our ARPA money, and compliance requirements that come from HUD.
So which, who or what section of the agency is in charge of ensuring compliance with housing production spending?
So our Development Finance Division is responsible with Housing Production Trust Fund spending. After a project is completed, we have a Portfolio Asset Management Division to ensure that the units are actually being used as intended.
And what changes need to be made either inside or outside of the agency for DHCD to comply with the 30% or less AMI requirement for Housing Production Trust Fund dollars?
So I go back to saying that we'll get the exact numbers again because I don't have them in front of me, but a large number of our funding did go to 30% of AMI and below. Housing Production Trust Fund dollars in and of itself did not go to there in the buckets as sort of laid out by the legislation. The reason for that is in making the decisions of creating as much affordable housing as possible, 0 to 30% AMI were better served by local rent supplement dollars or operating subsidies, so that people within the 30% and 0 categories could be housed in affordable housing units. That also allowed us to make the decision to stretch other dollars to people that are in need at 50% of AMI, 60% of AMI, and all these other affordable housing levels that also need housing. So they did not get funded. They got funded at a very high level, a very high rate of funding, but we all put other resources together so that there was more Housing Production Trust Fund dollars stretched across several income levels.
Right.
So if we were just to talk numbers, right, like the number of 0 to 30% units were actually, I want to say, and I will double check this, was actually higher than other units that were funded.
But
not with housing production.
Right. And I appreciate that answer and the context. What I would suggest is the law is clear with respect to Housing Production Trust Fund dollars and the percentage that's supposed to be of those dollars that's supposed to be committed to Housing Production Trust Fund projects and units. If the agency cannot comply with that or firmly believes that there's a better approach, what the committee needs is a proposal from the agency, but I won't be comfortable with the agency simply not following the law and using discretion it doesn't have. I am happy to take another look at the law after receiving DHCD's counsel, but this is going to continue to be an issue of concern for the committee and more broadly in the council. This is an issue that comes up multiple times every year. So what I would ask is that the agency either has to follow the law or be in clear communication with the committee about an alternative proposal.
I appreciate that.
You probably recall from the performance oversight hearing several weeks ago, we heard from witnesses and buildings that were either renovated or built with DHCD dollars that now have some concerning condition issues. Which DHCD division is responsible for monitoring the quality of DHCD funded projects on the back end?
So we have a portfolio asset management division, and we go out on a triennial basis to make sure that the projects are funded as required and that the units are habitable. We do a sampling of the units that owners don't know which ones we're coming to see, and make sure that they follow uniform standards of habitability, et cetera. In the interim, the Department of Buildings is really responsible for making sure that housing code violations are being met. So if we get a report in the interim, we will go out and look, of course, but really the enforcement agency is the Department of Buildings.
So if I'm a resident living in one of these buildings, there is not at this point a deep level of confidence in the Department of Buildings because of issues that DCRA had for many years. And if I'm a resident living in a building funded with taxpayer dollars through DHCD, and DHCD is saying, check with the Department of Buildings, and Department of Buildings is treating this like any other issue in the city, then we don't have a feedback loop on which folks are getting taxpayer dollars, how they're spending it, how responsible they are, and whether or not they're building quality housing. So this is a gap that I'm going to ask you to give some thought to. It is fair to say Department of Buildings needs to play a role, but they're not going to play a role without some coordination from DHCD. So let's work together on figuring that out, because I think we all want to make sure we're not financing people who are doing shoddy work. Is that something we can work together on?
completely work on that. And also we have a disbarment process. If someone is doing shoddy work, they can't come back for DHC funding in the future. In addition, if there are violations in any of our inspections, they get a notice of violations, they have to cure it, and we do follow up with them on that. So, but in the interim, we can figure out some ways to make sure that we are in communication and following and supporting cures in the interim.
I appreciate it. I think most actors are good actors, but some folks are doing shoddy work behind the walls, and it's an issue that falls onto residents and it really can disrupt lives, as you know.
Yes.
So we will work together on that. So I want to come back to all right, give me one moment. When the committee hears concerns about building or maintenance issues for projects that were funded by through DHCD, who should we send those concerns to? DHCD or Department of Buildings, or both?
I think the best approach is to send them to both of us.
Okay. I appreciate it. We have a couple to start with that we'll be sending. So want to talk about accessibility and community engagement, something we touched on a little earlier. I joined just about every resident in the city and feeling like I don't have a complete understanding of how many housing programs we have, who they are for, where they overlap, and how much we spend on each, which is makes it impossible to sort of audit our work and really have a comprehensive understanding of how programs work together. It's a lot. It can be confusing for someone trying to access housing and home ownership opportunities. It can be difficult for residents or the committee trying to better understand various programs and their effectiveness. To help the committee and the public understand all these intersecting housing programs better, can you share with the committee a chart that includes all of our housing programs and eligibility for each program, how much the district spends on affordable housing programs, let's say in the last 2 fiscal years, including money spent on program funds, administrative costs, and staff, and 3, how many units the district has produced in the last 2 fiscal years, including at what levels of affordability, what sizes, number of bedrooms, and in what neighborhoods. And I can send this in writing. What I would ask is, could you commit to getting us this breakdown by April 14th, which is a full month from now?
Sure. I can definitely work on that by April 14th for our programs. Some of the programs are not under DHCD's purview, to the extent that you want that information. Maybe I'm not sure how to handle that, but I can also let you know which one. It's definitely about what we oversee and the details on that.
Okay. I guess what I would ask is if you would coordinate with other agencies on that, if there are any gaps or difficulties getting that information, the committee will be helpful. We will assist.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, absolutely. And in the meantime, any other questions that you have, I'm always available in the meantime.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's part of the way people learn about various agencies' work is by attending agency hearings and events. My committee team has had some difficulty accessing DHCD meetings, and I do appreciate your staff already working to improve your processes. From your seat as the director, acting director at this point, what specific steps, well, if you are confirmed as a permanent director, what specific steps would you take to make DHCD more accessible to the public?
Again, our Housing Resource Center will be available. We will be putting out information about all of our public facing meetings that are required by we have several public facing meetings, QAP, the con plan, the CAPER, all of our oversight hearings. I think that we will make sure to invite and put out our email distribution list when they're coming up, so people know to attend. We would like to hear from people. We want to hear what they have to say, especially for our con plan and our CAPER. These are all really important to make sure that we have engagement from communities and district residents. So we will continue to make that outreach to them, also on our virtual platforms as well as in person. In addition to that, we will have ASA director sessions so that if there is information that people want to speak directly to our office, they can. We will propose that and get that out. We'll also do some community outreach meetings and let people know where we will be to go out in the community. At least 20 to 30% of my time will be spent out in the community discussing housing, affordable housing, our plans for DHCD. So we will let people know where I am, where our organization will be, come to different groundbreakings. We will put that out there on our website and make it available to the community.
That's wonderful. For the meetings that you mentioned, how do you get the word out? How do you notify communities about these meetings?
From my understanding, we do put information out in the DC Register. We also put information on our website. We also work with our community-based organizations and put out blast emails and information to let them know what's going on. And we do calls to people that we know will be interested. We also have something that you can register online if you want information from DHCD. You can get on our mailing list by registering on our website, and we will send out communications to that email address if you're on there.
Okay. I will ask that you continue to just pay attention to the number of people who attend meetings, not for a goal of getting any specific number of people to meetings, but just to make sure people are aware that people know about a meeting and they decide not to come. That's fine. We just want to make sure, as I'm sure you do, that people are aware of the various opportunities to engage with and try to help influence the agency.
I completely agree.
Last issue I want to talk about is timelines. Time is a critical factor when it comes to development. On one hand, project delays can result in higher costs for developers, and slow processing times can cause prospective home buyers to miss out on houses. On the other hand, rush projects can result in displacement and a sense of disrespect to residents. And so it's a difficult balance. For development projects funded through DHCD, what role does DHCD play in making sure a project sticks to a projected timeline?
So one of the advances that I have seen since I've been here is the 2 times per year RFP. So developers know in January and July, these will be the 2 opportunities to put forth your project. Previous to that, it was sort of, you had to wait to kind of find out when this RFP was coming out. Knowing that the RFP is coming out these 2 times a year, it's very helpful in terms of the timeline. In terms of making sure that we're ready. Again, DHCD is the gap financing. We have a number of things that have to happen on a regulatory side in terms of registration of vendors and payments and things like that. And we are working to make sure a lot of that sort of administrative things are done up front, so it doesn't delay anything in terms of closings. We often are sort of waiting for everything else to fall into place. As a gap financer, we wait for the banks, the lenders, the developer to get their permits and all these other things. So our role is to make sure that we're ready. Again, DHCD sometimes gets the blame because we are essentially the last people at the end of the project once everything, and we track that and try to make sure that our closing date is met according to the timing, and that we are there in terms of the milestones. So just keeping track and being in communication and making sure that we're responsive in terms of the needs that we need to have in place, and putting up front whatever we need early on so that at the closing, it's not a delay.
Okay. I appreciate that. I also think that, you know, as you follow through with setting up your advisory council and working groups, you're going to create a feedback loop that is going to help address anything within DHCD's control that can be fixed to make these projects work better, more seamlessly. I think you're going to get that feedback if you put the right people at the table. And as we talked about at the performance oversight hearing, the committee has heard that a lot of people have heard processing time for the HPAP, the Home Purchase Assistance Program. You mentioned some of this in your opening statement. The HPAP process has significantly slowed down, causing prospective home buyers to sometimes miss home ownership opportunities. Obviously, this has to change. What should we expect for the future of HPAP processing times?
So we've had a significant increase in applications from HPAP from this time last year to this time this year. In this first quarter, we've received, I believe, over 250 applications in HPAP, and they've been processed very quickly. So that is great. I'm interested in looking at the delays of people that are saying that they are receiving delays and getting feedback on that to make sure where in the process we are. For people that are qualified, have gone through the counseling, have the notice of eligibility, there's a way to fast track the process. And I'm going to look at how we can do that for the people that can be fast tracked. Sometimes the delays are happening because maybe people aren't qualified. Maybe there are issues with the uniqueness of the transaction that they're involved in. Maybe there's a unique sort of financing structure again, but I will look at anything in terms of delays. It is important that people meet their contract requirements and get to the closing table. So to the extent that I hear about delays, I will address them.
Appreciate that. Those are all the questions I have for you. Again, I want to thank you for pursuing this role. We always need people to be in service of the city. I want to thank you and your team for your preparation and you for being with us today. The committee obviously will take this hearing into account, and this is not likely to move before we get through our budget process. We want to make sure we had the public hearing with enough time for the public to give input and for the council and the committee to consider it before scheduling a markup, which again, I suspect will happen after we finish our budget work over the coming weeks. So again, Acting Director Green, thank you for being with us today. I want to mention for anybody who would like to submit testimony but was not able to join us today, written testimony will be made part of the official record. You can send testimony by email to the Committee on Housing at housing@dccouncil.gov. The record for this roundtable will remain open until the close of business on Tuesday, March 28th, 2023. Finally, for anyone listening who is interested in learning more about the work of this committee or my office, please sign up for our newsletter at robertwhiteatlarge.com. With that, the business before this committee is concluded. The time is now 12:13 p.m. and this roundtable is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.